The Mendiola Massacre is one of the most significant labor-related incidents in the history of the Philippines. On January 22, 1987, a violent dispersal of farmers' protest occurred in front of the Malacanang Palace in Mendiola, Manila, which resulted in the deaths of 13 farmers and the injury of many others. The massacre was rooted in the long-standing issues of land reform in the Philippines, which had been central concern for farmers and rural workers. In 1980s, the Philippine government under President Corazon Aquino had promised to address the problems of landlessness and poverty in the rural sector. The reform policies were slow and inadequate, which led to mounting frustration among farmers. In 1987, the Kilusang Mangbubukid ng Pilipinas or KMP, a prominent farmers group, led a protest demanding genuine land reform as the government's attempts were seen as insufficient. The farmers, mostly from rural areas, marched to Mendiola to call attention to their plight and pressured the Aquino administration to implement meaningful reforms. The protest escalated when the Philippine National Police or PNP and military were deployed to disperse the crowd. The protesters were unarmed, but the police opened fire, killing 13 farmers and injuring dozens of others. The event was dubbed the Mendiola Massacre and became a symbol of the government's failure to address the concern of the marginalized sector, particularly the farmers. The Mendiola Massacre left a deep scar on the Philippines' labor and peasant movement. It sparked outrage and condemnation both domestically and internationally. The incident also highlighted the tense relationship between the Aquino government and rural workers, showing the administration's failure to deliver on promises of land reform. The massacre led to public protest, which ultimately contributed to the growing dissatisfaction with the government's handling of labor issues and rural poverty. It brought attention to need for more significant reforms and was a rallying point for groups advocating for the rights of farmers and workers. The Mendiola Massacre remains a poignant symbol of the struggle for land reform and labor rights in the Philippines. Despite the Aquino government's attempts at land redistribution, the incident revealed the deep-rooted problems that continued to the agricultural sector and the challenges that labor's union and farmers face in fighting for their rights. The massacre demonstrated the risk of labor activism in the country, where violence and oppression are often used to quell dissent. Jaime Tadeo was a Filipino labor leader and activist known for his involvement in the labor movement during the martial law period in the Philippines. He is notably remembered for his role in the Mendiola Massacre, which occurred on January 22, 1987. The Mendiola Massacre was a tragic event where several farmers and activists were killed by government forces during a protest demanding land reform. Tadeo was one of the key leaders of the protest, which was organized by coalition of farmers and other activists to push for genuine agrarian reform. The protesters were marching toward Malacanang Palace in Manila to highlight their demand for land redistribution. Government troops opened fire on the demonstrators, resulting in the deaths of 13 people, with many others injured. Tadeo was not killed in the massacre but continued to be an active voice for the rights of the farmers. Jaime Tadeo was eventually assassinated in 1996. His death was widely believed to be linked to his activism and outspoken criticism of the government and elite interests, particularly those in control of land and resources. His murder remains part of the broader history of political violence in the Philippines, particularly targeting activists and leaders advocating for land reform and social justice.